I think with accounting, it's so easy to like when you experience your first failure to say, let me give up.
Yeah.
And let me go look at other career options. You know what I'm saying? It was a list that had everyone's name on it at the restaurant. And it wrote pass, fail, pass, fail, pass, fail.
Emotional damage.
Who am I? You know, is Bongani still enough? You know, when he doesn't have his CTA, but he's still working towards it. You know, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, and he was like, no, you're going back.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. He was like, I am literally going to support you and you're going to go back.
By 21, I've bought myself a mansion and you're just looking at yourself and you're like, yo.
You need to cry. You know, and I think with failure comes a lot of crying, you know.
Hello, professionals, and welcome back to another episode. I'm very excited for this episode because I feel like a lot of you will be able to relate. It's a really nice feeling when you're going through something that you feel is life-altering or that really shakes up your reality, only to realize that you're not the only one that's going through that. And there's so many other people that are too. And we can apply it to this conversation today because I feel like there's so many people that experience failure on the journey to qualifying as chartered accountants. In studio today, I'm joined by Bongani Ndlebe. Hi, Bongani.
Hi, Precious.
Thank you so much for honoring my invite. And
Thank you
joining
for
me
inviting me.
So he's here to share his experience, his journey, his experience with failure. This is going to be a bit of a different one because I've experienced failure myself. So we're going to be bouncing off our answers. so you can relax.
Okay,
I know I always say this is a conversation, but this is really like we're both answering
like you said, you're not alone in the journey. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Very, very. So tell us about yourself.
Okay, so I thought about this question as like, let me just start with the basics.
Sure, go for it.
My name is Bongani Ndlebe. I grew up in the Free State.
I thought you were from Joburg.
Really?
Yeah.
A lot of people thought I was from Joburg. I grew up in the Free State, actually. I grew up in a small town called Valcom.
Okay.
I grew up with my mom and my brother. And then around high school, moved to the Val. So stayed in the Val for like a couple of years throughout my high school years. And then went to UJ, undergrad, where I met Precious. That's how we know each other.
I met you in BC. Oh, yes, I met you in undergrad.
Yeah.
Cynthia. Hey.
We met through Cynthia in undergrad.
Yes.
And then I think throughout BCTA, that's when we became closer.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah.
So why accounting before we get into your whole journey?
Why accounting? This is so interesting. I actually used to like accounting in high school.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I did quite average, good, well in it. And I think with accounting, it was just one of those subjects that I really somehow understood the numbers and how they came together, but also try to understand what was the scenario behind the numbers, you know? So like in high school, I think I really enjoyed like the journals. I remember.
Can't relate, but
yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed that topic. There was this problem solving topic around like journals, if there were errors and stuff like that. I don't know how I was able to work around that, but like in high school, that's when I picked up that I have a sudden interest in like accounting.
Okay, so that was really early on.
That was really early on, yeah. And I think like I used to even ask like my accounting teacher questions around like what careers are possible in accounting. And I think I started looking up like chartered accountancy like in a very like young age, like in grade 10, 11.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought about it, you know. But yeah, that's why I chose accounting actually.
And then tell us about the journey, the story to this point now.
Okay, the story to this point now. So become accounting, undergrad, then did my BCTA. It was a bit of a challenge as well, especially like around like adjusting from the accounting to how I think in BCTA it's more practical and it's more technical, you know. So that was quite interesting as well. So I did my BCTA at UJ and then I took a gap year. 2 gap years actually.
Okay.
And this was like right in the midst of COVID. So first time around I failed accounting and it was tax, right? And even then, like looking back, you know, when you reflect on your failure, it's like a 2% difference or 3% difference. You know what I'm saying? And then I went back again, did it again, got it. Weirdly enough, the module that I failed almost got like a distinction for finance.
Wow.
It was like a 70 something, So I think sometimes the second time around, you're a bit more rational,
Yeah.
than when you first walked in and you were a bit nervous and stuff like that. But that was the first time I encountered failure. But yeah.
Let's unpack that. I told you we are bonding over our failure trauma in this episode.
Yeah.
So when did you realize that, okay, I'm gonna fail this year?
Sure. I definitely think it was towards I think finals, you can tell, But weirdly enough, I got a sub, right? And I passed the counting actually. And the thing that made me fail the module was that my year mark was low. So when they put the marks together, it was kind of like, okay, you need like a 3%, but like you still need to redo the whole year.
So you only realized at the end, basically.
Yeah, towards the end, I pushed, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think learning to understand myself, it's like I've always like had struggled with like being anxious and overthinking stuff. So I think it made me realize like, okay, where did I go wrong the first time around? Like, how can I approach this with a different mental stage? So I think one of the biggest lessons about failure is actually learning to engage with it. You can't really run away from the feelings. And I think I think our age mates, we try to like, when we experience failure, we try to write it off.
100%.
We try to write it off with like the next success story,
That is so true.
And I think with accounting, it's so easy to like when you experience your first failure to say, let me give up.
Yeah.
And let me go look at other career options. You know what I'm saying? But I think I was challenged in the sense of I had to engage with those feelings of failure and say like, okay, why, who am I? And I think the hardest thing also around that was probably like, I've always measured myself according to how and what I've achieved in my whole life. So it was kind of like interesting to be in a space where like what you measured yourself against, like achievements and stuff like that, is not happening, And I think that was a point in my life where I had to learn to say like, okay, who am I? Is Bongani still enough? When he doesn't have his CTA, but he's still working towards it, But it was quite an interesting journey, but yeah.
I love that. So you had to find like self-acceptance beyond academic validation.
Self-acceptance, but also I think the story behind us being perfect, I think it was quite interesting because I've always been a perfectionist. I've always wanted things to happen like, okay, 25, we want this. 24,
Yes.
Like we were planners.
And social media doesn't help, hey?
It
I always talk about the
doesn't.
whole thing of comparison and
Yeah.
people posting by 21, I've bought myself a mansion, and you're just looking at yourself and you're like, yo,
Until you decide to become
what
a
am I
CA.
doing wrong? You know what I mean? Okay,
Yeah.
so you find out that you are repeating BCTA. What emotions are you feeling?
Sure. Shame. I think shame.
That's a huge one.
I think shame is a very huge one. Fear. You fear like, what happens now? Is there a way out of this? And I think shame and failure, disappointment. I think disappointment was one of the biggest ones that I struggled with. And I think disappointment in myself, disappointment in disappointing people, But I think what I've realized with disappointment is that it's expectations that you have set for yourself. And
So true.
yeah, I'd set high expectations for myself and said, Bongani, I want you to do this by this time, But I think in that time, I think it made me realize that I needed to accept my journey and that it's different and it's not going to be what I expected out of myself. But also, I think I had to learn that I'm human, and life happens,
Yeah.
and I think that there are so many things that I've planned out or I've thought they would happen in a specific way. But like I've had to let go, and grieve all those expectations and just really let things be and accept where I am. So Yeah, that's
I love
good.
that you brought up the emotion of shame. I feel like I felt that too
Sure.
when I received my results and found out I failed my first attempt of CTA. To the point where I remember some family was going to some function. And I was just like, no, thank you, because I don't want to be asked Health University to tell them, no, I failed, you know? So I don't want to say I was hiding for a while, but I feel like that's the perfect way to describe what I was doing. I was in hiding because I was ashamed that I had failed the year. I also felt left behind, that my peers are in the workplace now. And it didn't help that they were posting about, you know, the first day in the workplace. That really didn't help the situation at all. And again, you plan out your future and you have these timelines for yourself. By this point, I'm going to, you know, be in articles already, and I'm going to be, and then it doesn't happen and you feel like your reality is just shattered, and it's a horrible place to be in. How did you overcome? How did you get through that?
Sure. I think, like I said, you can't run away from the emotions. So I had to learn to engage with them. I think I think from a young age, I'd always been someone who could take like the emotions and channel them into focusing or something like that, you know? But I think that's not really engaging with them. It's sort of like, in a way, running from them.
Yeah.
you know, like, because you're like, let me work against the failure,
Yes.
you know? But I think it gets to a point where what you're feeling inside, especially around the failure or the disappointment, it just accumulates to a point where it's like, you need to engage with this. You need to sit down and be honest with yourself and say, this is what you're feeling, you know? And I think for me, that's when there was a turning point of actually taking my mental health into like consideration and saying, okay, we are not happy. We don't know what's going on. We have all these big emotions that we can't even like rationalize with, you know? But I started taking therapy really seriously, and I started breaking down my emotions, the shame. But to be quite honest with you, I cried when I needed to cry.
Yeah, no, that's important.
Yeah. I think I like one thing I've been very honest about myself is that I'm very sensitive, you know, and I think I know I have seasons where I am very honest with myself and say, you need to cry, you know, and I think with failure comes a lot of crying, you know, but I think what people don't realize is that, you know, engaging with the emotions may seem like something that is weak, but it's actually a lot of courage, because you're willing to go to areas or parts of yourself that you don't know what happened or why it happened, but you're willing to engage and make peace with it so that you can move on, you know? So I really started becoming very intentional in terms of like engaging with those emotions, because they were quite heavy, and understanding them. But I think also the lie is that you're not going to overcome it. But you do, actually. You do.
You're an article. I'm an article.
You know, you do. Like with the first few months of like failure, it feels like, yo, how am I?
And you
gonna
feel
do
like
this?
a year is the longest time.
The
like,
longest.
oh yeah, I need to repeat a
You
whole
know?
year.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's how I can say I overcame it. I engaged with the emotions. I went head on.
Yeah, no, you seem like you handled it in a very healthy way. I threw myself into working.
Okay.
I feel like that's a big coping mechanism. The
It
older
is.
I get, I start to realize. Just working, I just put my head down and was in the books. When I thought about it and having failed, it hurt. And I was just like, oh, well, I guess, you know, back to the books.
Yeah,
man.
you were quite resilient. I remember.
But the thing is, I didn't face it the way you did. You know how
Yeah.
you speak about facing those emotions, you know, head on head. I didn't do that. There was no unpacking. I
Really?
didn't unpack with anybody.
Yeah.
I just jumped into it. Again, though, so I received my results that I failed my supplementary exam in January.
Okay.
I think it was like a few days later, the academic year was starting. So I was like, okay, you can cry about it, but you have 2 minutes before it's game time.
Hey, and that schedule of CTA
You know what I
by October it's finals.
Yeah.
You haven't had time to breathe or process your emotions. So I get it.
Yeah.
I know, I get it.
So
You
I don't
dived
know. I
straight
feel
in.
like your way of dealing with it was way healthier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, we all deal differently.
Yeah, that's
you know?
true.
So I'm glad it worked for you, you know? I think it works. Everyone has a different way of coping, and you're here now.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So who was the first person you told that you had failed?
Sure. First of all, I cried with myself in my room.
Yeah.
You know.
Where were you? You were in your room when you received your results.
Yeah. Because I think it's that time where we leave and we go back home. So the results usually come out like, oh yeah, I remember. I was actually at home. I was at home. This is CTA, right?
No, BCTA.
BCTA.
We're not there. We're still that
BCTA.
person.
Okay. BCTA. I was at, because I remember I was writing subs.
Yeah.
So I think, I got my results when I moved out.
Okay.
Like went back home. And my dad was the first person I told. And I was very emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I was very like, I think the hardest thing for my parents to receive the news was that I think they were used to having me being an achiever, you know? So it was also kind of like hard for them to really grasp how can we help you? You know, how can we, it
Yeah.
was, and I think with accounting, it's so difficult to explain where you went wrong because there's a lot that happened.
Actually.
I can't pinpoint and
Yeah,
say
yeah.
it was tax, it was auditing, it was this,
Yeah.
it was a lot. But I think that was the first failure I'd experienced that really knocked my confidence over. It made me feel like, hey, I can't,
And how did they react?
They were actually really supportive. My dad actually was like, you can go back, and repeat. I'll be there. And one thing I've always appreciated from my parents is that they've been actually very supportive of my journey in studying, and that is a confidence booster,
really
especially when
is.
you're like at your lowest and you're thinking that you've disappointed your parents,
Yeah.
and they say, okay, we see that you've invested so much of yourself, So I think them believing in me in moments where I'd literally not believed in myself that much, it kind of was like the timing is perfect.
Yeah.
Like this is a time where I'm weak and they come in and just, gather and give me the last boost I need before diving into it again. But yeah, my parents were the first people to know actually.
And then when your friends or people in your circle found out.
Yeah. That one
Why
was a
that
bit
reaction?
tricky because some
Why?
of them moved on,
Yeah.
And I think that's where the comparison started coming in, where we were like, hey, you're in your second year, you're in your first year of articles, you're moving into CTA. And I think CTA is where everyone wants to be, you
Yeah.
know. So, but I think also it was interesting because I think when I was doing my CTA again, it was also around almost COVID. So the job market was kind of also, there was a lot of interruption, But telling my friends,
The reason I ask is I want to get down to what reactions you liked, which
Yeah.
ones you didn't like, so
Yeah.
that someone watching this who has a family member who's experiencing failure or friend,
Yeah.
how do they react to it?
You
So
know-
I want us to share that insight.
okay, yeah. You know what's interesting? When you tell people that you failed and they actually highlight how much you've put in, they show you that they remind you of the hard work that you put in. And I think that was the interesting perspective from like friends, like telling my friends that, oh, I failed, and they were like, yo, Bongs, you study hard. Like you put in a lot of hours, And I think the first thought that comes to you after failing is that it was in vain. Like what did I do all that for? And I think the most beautiful perspective was hearing from friends that I saw you study. I saw you put in the hours. It's just like they had the right words to say. And I think the first thing was the shame that was trying to withhold you being vulnerable and being sincere with your friends and saying like, hey, I failed, But I was honest with my friends. I think that was the one thing I wanted to be very transparent in and just let them know that I failed, and I didn't want to hide that from them. But I was quite surprised at how sharing those moments made me realize I'd actually put in a lot of work and it wasn't in vain. I think I struggled with that a lot, but it was nice being vulnerable with friends.
Yeah.
I think shame can make you hold on to failure and it can be such a heavy thing to carry. But I think the only way to overcome it is finding safe spaces around your friends to be able to share and be vulnerable, and them just being able to accept. Sometimes even if it's just listening. I remember I would get on a call with my friend, Cynthia. And we talk.
That's our mutual
You know, that's our friend. And then we would just talk on the phone. And we'd just like, you know, it was such
she's a great listener.
Yeah, she's a great
She's so
listener. So it
reassuring.
was really nice to like just have someone to talk to through it. But tell your friends in conclusion.
Yeah.
You know?
The first person I told was my then boyfriend, now husband. And when I received the results, I wanted to be alone.
Sure.
So I was in my car waiting. And then I found out that I failed. So I went to his place and, you know, I started crying. I was just like, baby, I didn't make it.
Shame.
I know. And then his reaction was like, it's okay. Let's do it again. You know, let's give it another go. Let's do this year again. And I must say that my favorite reactions from friends and family was when they're like, okay, it's nothing. Like, you know, small waters. That was the best. The worst for me was when people got really emotional, like, oh my gosh, no, I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Like, how are you feeling? That one was, I hated those type of reactions. And I loved the ones that they were like, okay, you know what, it's just a year, you know, come on.
It's just a year.
Let's go. You
And
know,
it
you've
is
got
just a year.
this. It really is.
It really
like,
is.
look how this year flew by.
Oh no, it flew by.
It flew by
Like
so
we're in
fast.
December now.
Imagine. Okay, so you repeat BCTA, and then what?
Repeat BCTA, eventually go back, finish it off. COVID hit.
So when you do it the second time, you pass.
Yeah,
BCTA.
I do pass. I do pass the second time around. And then I think straight after that, that's when COVID hit. But yeah, and then I took a gap year that year. I actually wanted to branch into financial management.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was looking for jobs like crazy.
Why did you want to branch into financial management?
I don't know, like it was just like something like, even if it wasn't like just financial management, but I think I just wanted to be independent at that time and just look for a job, you know.
Was it a thing of your peers are working, you not?
Yes.
Yeah.
It does come to that point where you feel like, okay, no, let me just, you know,
Get into the
branch
job
out
market.
and see what goes on, you know. And briefly landed a role of like being in financial advisory. And it was quite interesting. It was very like sales oriented, you know, like you were selling financial products to people, you know. So it required a lot of like a sales personality, you know. But I think what I liked about like being in that space was that our manager was very honest with us. And she was like, guys, if you are not a salesperson, just look at the training for 3 months and see if it works for you or if it doesn't. Personally, for me, it didn't work. It didn't
You
work.
struggled to start?
Yeah, I struggled with the whole sales thing. Like, I don't think it was part of my personality. I was just like, no, you know. That's when I went back to CTA. I went back to CTA and I reapplied again and went back to UJ and did it. And
So what conversation did you have with I'm assuming they funded your studying.
my parents.
Yeah.
Okay. My parents were actually for it.
Okay.
I think especially like my dad. My dad and I always have like conversations around like business and stuff. So I think he could tell in the job market how difficult it is to get a job like without CTA, you know. But I think also we're just looking at the economy and employment and all these things, and you know. And he was like, also I think he had seen how much I invested so far, and he was like, okay, like you've really come a long way, and you just need your CTA. That's all that's missing, and then literally you can jump.
Yeah.
You know. So I went back. It was a bit of a challenge. Going back into your studies after taking 2 years off, like my brain was like, okay, we need to get back. And I think also with CTA, everything's just go.
Big time.
You
I remember before you got into CTA when you were still working, I think you sent me a voice note and I was just like, this is not for me. Like my heart is in CASA. I'm going back. Like, I want it so bad.
Thanks for confirming.
But I was so impressed by your resilience and the fact that
No,
you know
thank
what
you
you
so
want
much.
this
Yeah, thank
whatever
you.
circumstances.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. So I did it at UJ, and again came failure, knocked me out. Um, this time around, weirdly enough, when I told my parents, I was telling them I'm done.
Is it?
I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, you know. And I remember in that moment, my dad actually did something so nice. He actually took us on a holiday because he was so worried about me, and he was like, he'd seen how much I'd invested in this, and he could tell how disappointed I was. And I remember having the conversation with him, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, you know. And he was like, no, you're going back.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. He was like, I am literally going to support you, and you're going to go back and finish what you
Your
started.
parents are amazing.
Like he literally said, like, and I remember like even in that moment, I agreed that I'm done. You know, I just accepted defeat, and he was just like, no, we're going back. And I went back and I passed. I finally got the CTA.
So from UJ, you failed.
From
then you went
UJ,
to,
I went to IIS, Institute of
Okay.
Accounting Science, and that's where I got my CTA. And today we are doing our articles.
Congratulations.
Thank you
This is
so
going to be
much.
so motivating for people that are in the same boat.
Yeah. You're doing our articles.
So how did you keep going? Now you're at IAS.
Hmm.
How did you find the stamina, the motivation to keep going after
Keep going after
experiencing failure twice?
experience. I think this is why, for me, engaging with these emotions of failure is important, because I think if I were to suppress them, I probably would have found a counterfeit something career to like just, you know, erase everything and try to look successful, you know. So I think with me, I sat down and I was like, we're in the cycle again. We've been here before. You're disappointed. What did you do the last time when you were disappointed? You sat with it. You cried it out. You released it, you know. And I think in psychology, they talk about this thing where they call it cognitive dissonance. So it's basically like where your brain is, it feels something, right? And it's not able to rationalize with it yet. So it's still in the phase of it being highly emotional, right? But the more you engage with it, the more you start moving from a stage of like feeling to thinking, you know? So you start rationalizing of like, okay, how could I do better? Okay, you failed. But like, and then that's when I started like becoming a bit more present, you know, and started realizing, okay, we need to actually figure out what went wrong in tax, you know, what went wrong in
I love
accounting.
that. How long does that usually last? Like the feelings part?
So I have to be very intentional with this. Usually I would say the first few months, I allow myself to feel what I need to feel. You know, I allow myself. I think one of the things that I always found to help me is to create a safe space for me to be able to feel what I need to feel. So I would be intentional in the feeling. If I need to cry, I cry. You know, because I knew that it was part of the process of accepting where I am and finding a way forward. So sat there, I cried when I need to cry, but get up. And eventually you do. Actually, it's so weird because you're like, oh, actually, I don't feel like crying today. Today I feel
I'm
like
sorry to laugh.
you know, like, oh, actually, wait, today I feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, no, I feel lighter today. You know, and it just becomes a way of like, actually, no, I can do this. You know, actually, wait, I'm doing this. You know, actually, I did do this. You know, so
I love that.
eventually it does get to a point where you keep going and you just don't realize that you've overcome so much already. But yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the knock on the self-esteem.
Sure. Yeah, the knock on self-esteem. Hey.
Because I mean, it's easy to label yourself as a failure
Yeah.
after experiencing failure.
Yeah,
How did you distinguish those two?
I think this is where like my faith comes into place. I think I started knowing God in a very intimate way of like saying to him that I don't feel enough. You know, I feel like a failure, you know. And I think my prayers were more surrounded around like, okay, more like vulnerable prayers, you know, and I started praying to God and I started feeling like, who am I outside of everything, you know? But weirdly enough, I think the beautiful thing about coming to God, and there's a scripture that talks about how he's really close to the brokenhearted. And I think sometimes we don't get it as Christians. That's like when you sit in that space of vulnerability and letting your heart out to God and just sharing with him what you feel, he'll never leave you the way he found you, you know?
Love that.
And I think like to me, it was moments like that where I kept coming in, I felt like a failure, but somehow like the prayer of like surrendering that thought of feeling like a failure and releasing it to God and saying to him that I feel like a failure, and he says he doesn't see you as a failure, you know? So it was just those little moments and those promptings to just listen to a little bit of worship here and there, you know, and you realize, okay, I'm not a failure. You know, that's not part of my identity. And I think that's what I wanted to distinguish, was that I can't over-identify with being a failure, you know. It is something that I went through, you know, but I think one of the hardest things is to say, okay, it was part of a season. Now it's time to leave and get out of it, you know. And I think mentally as well, it's very important, because I think failure can leave scars on your mind, on you as a person, you know. And I
It really
think,
can.
yeah, so I think engaging with it, what it does is that when we go through the healing of it and actually going through it and engaging with it, I think when you come out on the other side, I don't think you've realized how you've already broken a pattern of the way you used to think when you are a failure.
That is
you
so
know?
true. Yeah.
So I think, and also sometimes when it comes again, you're familiar with what it is. So you no longer like sit in a place where you're overly emotional about it, but you're more of like, okay, I've been here before. So now how do we rationalize in this season and what do we do? You know,
Yeah.
so, but yeah. That's me.
I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah.
On my side, things were a bit different. I
Okay.
was angry.
Okay.
I was so upset. I couldn't even pray. I was mad at God. I couldn't pray. I was just like, what's the point?
What's the point?
Like I prayed throughout CTA. I still failed. I asked my mom to pray. I asked my neighbors to pray. I asked everybody.
I know exactly what you're
and I
talking about.
still failed. So I had that feeling of what's the point for such a long time. And I was just so mad. I think that lasted for long. I think like 7 months, somewhere there. I was just like, nope, I'm fine. Like, I'm not going to pray. But obviously we're in a better place now.
Yeah, that's good.
But again, like you said, I think you become a different person
You do.
having experienced that. But that journey and experiencing that definitely puts you in a place where when you come across failure again, you know how to navigate it
Yeah,
better.
you do actually.
And it's less of a huge event in your life and more of a, okay, this is a step closer to achieving what I need to achieve and a step closer to achieving my goals, which is nice.
True.
So you pass CTA and then what happens?
I passed CTA. Still can't believe it. I really couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I had to like soak it in and be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like I picture myself and like be like, okay, I pass CTA, venture into my first year of articles. We've briefly spoken about this.
Yeah.
We sit like I was at
But how does your board exam go?
oh, okay. I go into CTA. When I was writing my like in Jan, I wrote my subs.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So like the overlapping for like the ITC, I was
Yes.
so tired. Like
I
I think I
can
had a week
imagine.
in between. And I was like really exhausted, but that didn't go well.
Yeah.
So that also took a knock. But the weird thing is, it took a knock on my confidence. But weirdly enough, a lot of things were happening at that time. I think at work, I was doing quite good-ish, you know. And also a lot of things were happening outside of my life. Like I was moving into my new place. So the day we got the results was the day I actually got my keys.
So one side you're crying, one side you're celebrating. Oh my God.
and it's kind of like, it's kind of like, when you look back and you're like, a few years back, you were in your room crying over failing, and now you're here and you got the keys to your place, and it's kind of surreal, but it's almost as like you're feeling two feelings at the same time.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I remember. Okay, I have a story behind this
Okay.
failure. Okay, so like in your LOR, you can
Yes.
claim a competency for emotional
Oh.
intelligence. Yeah.
Oh, yes,
You
yes,
can.
yes.
So I actually put it in my LOR.
Oh, nice.
I was like, it was a bit rough for me for the first couple of weeks, and I struggled with grasping the results and the outcome and whatever. And I think when my manager so I claimed a level 1,
Okay.
and then when my manager like when he signed off the LOR, he gave me a level 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So just for some context,
Yeah.
LORs are those psycho competencies that
Yeah,
you claim
yeah.
like throughout your article.
Yeah.
As a trainee.
Yeah. So I think that for me it was quite interesting, and I think also it didn't knock me that much.
As much as
Yeah,
the others.
it really wasn't. Like, I think for that weekend I was like, okay, no, it's fine. Let me see where I went wrong.
Yeah.
Where did we go wrong? And we followed up with the script and we tried to see where we went wrong. And yeah, that was quite interesting.
I want to touch on receiving your board exams in corporate because of the setup. Tell us about that. So we're at my firm, it's a whole function. So before the exams are released, we go out for lunch. I'm guessing it's the same for you.
It is.
So we go out for lunch, and then you have a choice to either go back to the firm and receive the results in front of everybody.
Okay.
Or after the lunch, you can go home and receive the results by yourself.
Okay. So with us, it was a function.
Okay.
And then with the function, it was a list that had everyone's name on it at the restaurant, and it wrote pass, fail, pass, fail, pass, fail.
Emotional damage.
Emotional. And it was like, whoa. But yeah, it was quite.
Do they read out the names, or do you have to go to the
You
list
have
and
to
check?
go and read your name on the list. So literally went there and read my name on the list, and it was a series of emotions.
So did you leave immediately, or did you stay to enjoy the lunch?
Actually left. I think it was a bit too much for me. I think I think the shame and everything, and obviously you start questioning, like, when will things go right? Like, why does it have to become a hurdle like this? And I still don't have the answer to that. But what I do know is that I'm not my failure. What I do know is that I can overcome it. I can keep going. And I think that was the most important thing for me, is to not over-identify with where I went wrong. But learn to rationalize and be like, okay, we can sit down and engage with this. What didn't work the first time around? So yeah, it was quite interesting. It was quite a challenge, but it wasn't that challenging in a weird way. I thought it would be heavier.
Yeah.
But somehow I managed to get around that one,
And after the lunch, when you're back with your team and stuff, is it a conversation of how it went?
Actually, they were actually quite supportive. I remember my team at that time, they actually left because I remember they came to support me specifically, and they were like, no, you did amazing. We're here for you, But just hearing them say things like, no, it's going to work out next time around. Like, don't ever give up, It's just the right words that you needed at that time. So they were very accepting, and very nice and reassuring, and I think I needed those words in that moment. So I guess there's grace when things like that happened.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it's not defining. There are people that go on to become partners, CEOs, CFOs, own companies, having dealt with failure.
I'm speaking that into existence. I will take a CEO position any day.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for someone that is dealing with failure? You first. I'll go second. I actually heard a quote, was it a tweet or something?
Yeah.
of someone who said, hey, the CASA stream or the CASA journey will turn one into a motivational speaker.
Yeah,
And it's so true.
It is so
because
true.
It's so rigorous.
It is so real, guys. Okay, I think we've been romanticizing failure a bit.
Not romanticizing.
Not
I like to
romanticizing.
say we're normalizing it because so
Normalizing
many
it.
people.
Yeah,
go
I
through
think
it.
I wanted to say, if you like, I think everyone, like, first of all, everyone's journey is different.
Yeah.
You know, and I think one of the things that is very difficult for you to do when you experience failure is to accept it. You know, but it is part of your story. If it happened, learn or find a way to eventually accept it. I think acceptance is the only way to move forward, you know, and I think the one thing I really want to say is failure is not who you are. You know, I think it's part of what you've experienced, it's part of what happened in your life, but it's definitely not who you are. And I think the most important thing for someone who's dealing with failure right now is that you are not your failure. You know, you can overcome it. And I think the biggest lie is that it's the end. No, it's not. You know, there's something, I would say there's something you did right. You got to, especially with accounting. And I think this is the mentality that was really difficult, especially when you go back. Like you need to learn to realize that, especially in CTA, like you need the mentality of realizing you're making progress, you know, because the marks don't accumulate like
That's true.
15%. It's always like a 1, a 2, a 3. Sometimes you see your age. And you're like, wow.
Oh my gosh.
Is this real?
That's true. That's a nice way of looking at it because you see your results and you think, oh, I failed again.
Yeah.
Rather look at it like, how much have you improved from the last time?
Yeah.
And keep that going.
Keep that going. And I think also sometimes what I've realized is that with like even questions, like you might get a lower mark, but like when you actually look at how you did in the previous question, is that you find that you might have missed out a question, but you did a question, but you did better in this question than you did in the previous time. You know, so it's perspective that really keeps you going. But I would say engage with your failure. I think I'm an advocate for that, and don't stay where you are. You know, it's you can overcome it.
Love that. So it's my turn.
It's your turn.
I think advice to anyone going through failure, I like to think of failure as feedback. I love the saying of fail often, fail soon, fail often, or something like that. Because it's feedback. It's going to give you the feedback on you're doing something wrong so that you can work with that and see what you're doing wrong, correct it, and then get to the place where you're doing things better. So seeing failure as feedback and not taking it as, oh my gosh, I'm a failure, is going to get you closer to your goal.
Yeah, that's true.
So I am very passionate about this topic. And I feel like if it wasn't for the failure that I went through with CTA, one, we wouldn't be having this conversation because that was the reason I started my YouTube channel, because I had failed.
Sure.
And I felt so alone after having failed because I felt like throughout the year, the lecturers were all like, you know, you're not alone. We're going to do this. Don't worry about passing or failing. Just worry about what's in front of you. And then come results, and then it's a fail, and then there's just silence.
Silence. Crickets.
And you just feel like you're completely alone. Nobody's checking up on you. I mean, by nobody, I mean like no institution is checking up on you. And this can be hard for a lot of people. That's why these type of conversations are important.
It really can.
So yeah, if it wasn't for that failure, I wouldn't have started my YouTube channel. We wouldn't be having this conversation, and gap learning wouldn't be established as well. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm grateful that failure paid me a visit.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think it creates a good character in you.
It does.
It does. Like
of resilience
as well. But I used to think also, you know, when you walk into corporate and you have a bit of an age gap between the other trainees.
Yeah.
You know, I always felt like, am I behind?
Yeah.
You know, but I think there's something about walking into a place when you know who you are.
Love that.
When you know who you are, especially in corporate, it's very important. Like I'm so grateful that it's molded me to become a mature person in the corporate space and know what are my boundaries what is yes or no, whether I like this or whether I don't, because I think younger me would have just let corporate mold me, But I think it's very important to introspect into those times where you experience failure, because I think sometimes it's building a better you. So I think that was the biggest lesson.
Yeah. Now that you bring it up, I also realize that I'm very open to feedback, even with my managers. Like as soon as I do something, I'm like, okay, so, are you happy with this? Do you want me to change something? Whereas maybe in the past, I would have felt like, okay, let me get this done. And then I'm running away from that feedback. But now I'm very open to it. Like I want to hear it as soon as possible so that I can correct what I need to.
That's good.
When I need to, yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Because I think also this could possibly open a way of like you have better interpersonal skills of interacting with people, especially when you're a manager. I think having empathy for someone who's struggling as a trainee or going through something, you're able to understand or have interpersonal skills of saying, okay, this person needs this and that and that and that, But I think it's something that is it's a gap in the CA journey.
Yeah.
Like I think we become very technical and we forget that we work with humans.
That's so true.
We work with humans.
That's so true.
And I think the most important thing for me was to say, okay, I see that you're trying to get all these, technical skills and all these things. But I think for me, who am I, the character that I want to be within the space is very important to me. And I think things like this build you, The more you walk when you walk back, it's like, okay, no, I understand what failure is. It's a human trait. It's something people experience, but it's also something people try to hide away from.
That's true.
It's sad and unfortunate, but
But this conversation, hopefully it makes an impact to people watching.
It does.
In closing, I would love to find out what you did in your second attempt of CTA. For people that are in the same boat.
Okay.
What did you change?
What did I change in my second attempt of CTA? Systems. When I walked into... So UJ has a different system from IAS.
Okay.
I firstly noted the difference.
By system, you mean like way of testing?
Yeah, way of testing, way of marking. What do the markers look for? How to get... what's this? Your bonus marks, your how the framework of how to answer this question, the skeleton and all these things, right? So I think also it's okay to start over. I think one of the things that really helped me was starting on a new slate and saying, okay, I'm in a new institution, let me focus, let me learn again. Clearly there's something to learn. And when I started learning, I started engaging more with the lecturers and trying to understand them. But I think one thing I liked about the lecturers at IIS is that they give feedback on what they were expecting and how to answer the questions. And they go in depth, So I think understanding what the marker wants to get out of you. Because I think sometimes there's a lot of subjectivity in some of the modules, especially when you trying to say, is this deductible, tax deductible, whatever, it's subjective, but there were core principles that give you marks, so I think that's where I started picking that up. I don't know, do you want me to split into the modules?
You can. We have 1 minute left.
1 minute left. But I think with accounting, it's more in the standards, like understanding the skeleton and the framework of what each topic is about. And then with tax, it was really principle based. But I think what I realized that would help me was going back and realizing that you needed to remember your basics. Tax doesn't change. Like Section 11A is Section 11A, It does get complex, but stick to your basics. I think sometimes you tend to forget that. And then I think in auditing, it's all about the wording, the quality of the work. I think with auditing, give 6 points that have all the structure of how you need to respond to the question instead of just, scrambling on and getting as much points as possible, And with financial management was actually one of my favorite modules. I actually enjoyed it. It was more of like understanding. I think I used to be able to do the formulas and stuff like that. But once I started understanding, why do we have CVP? Why do we have this? it made it more like it made it make more sense. And then when you're reading a scenario, it makes it binds everything together. So it gives you a bigger picture. So I think that was my strategy, and I started like just being more active and speaking up more. I used to be self-sufficient. I consulted more. You know,
Nice, love that.
yeah. So if I didn't understand something, I'd just go and be like, I don't get this, you know. But yeah, that's that.
And we forget that the university is also a service provider, and we
see?
need to make use of the services and consult when we need to.
Yeah,
etc.
consult.
So that's
when you do.
important.
So yeah, no, that was how I did it differently this time around.
Thank you so much, Bongani.
Thank you so much, Precious.
I really hope this episode, and I'm sure this episode is going to help so many people, because failure is so common in the journey to CASA. If you took anything from this episode, how's that saying? If you didn't take anything from this episode, take this sentence, which is do not let failure define you. It's an event that happened in your life. It's not defining. Thank you so much. Oh, where can people find you?
On social media?
Yeah.
Okay, you can find me on Instagram.
Okay. As Bongani.
Bongani. So it's Bongani. Instead of an A, it's a V.
Okay.
So
I'll
underscore.
write it.
Yeah.
I'll add it to
Add
the
it down there. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Bongani Ndlebe. And yeah, that's mainly the two social medias platform that I use.
All the best with the journey to come.
Thank you, guys. I'll be back as a CEO. Precious said it.
Yeah, it's gonna happen for sure. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I really hope this episode helped you. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you're listening to this via Spotify, don't forget to follow the podcast. Thank you so much. Until my next video. Bye.